Welcome to the Fantasy NASCAR podcast, home of the Fantasy NASCAR spreadsheet that you can get at racefortheprize.com. Check it out. I'll save the advertisement for later. Let's get into it. Clash 2025. What are the picks? What are the plays? We can't really give you the picks of the plays yet, but we can talk strategy. We can look, as you are looking at one of the many tabs in the Fantasy NASCAR spreadsheet, at the optimal lineup from 2024. Maybe we can build some strategy ideas to help us build some winning lineups. And for this video, and for a series of videos that I will do going forward, let's play a little game of chalk or not. Now, what's chalk or not? Why does it matter? Well, there's this idea that you're going to hear permeate through the quote-unquote industry, or the 5 Fantasy NASCAR YouTube videos that exist out there. There's too much variance. NASCAR's volatile. The only way to win is to build 150 lineups and to use a simulator. Look, simulator tools are great. All the tools are great. All the DFS NASCAR minds out there, including you, are great. But the idea, the concept of variance, volatility, these cliche terms just get thrown around. They're never really explored. Let's explore them as we look at the clash and figure out, hey, how can I win? How can I have fun? How can I enjoy this? Positivity, optimism. That's this show. That's what you tune in. That's what this community's always been about. It's great. It's awesome. So, what's a positive way? Now, we don't want to be subjective and always looking through those rosy colored lenses and missing the truth. But no real reason to be so negative and curmudgeons about, oh, I hate NASCAR. I hate NASCAR. We love NASCAR here. And so with chalk or no chalk, we explore the idea of, if there is chalk, then it's predictable. Then you can use your Fantasy NASCAR mind and your knowledge to build a winning lineup without building 150 lineups. To build a winning lineup without simulating anything. Build a winning lineup without needing advanced tools. Just give me some simple data, let me do my work, and I'll start to cook. If there's chalk. Now, if we explore some of these races moving forward and find out, ooh, no real chalk in that, then yeah, that's a feather in the sim cap. It's a feather in the optimizer cap. And that's okay. But let's explore. Let's look at the clash from 2024. Look at the optimal lineup. You can see one of the many tabs in the Fantasy NASCAR spreadsheet available at racefortheprize.com. And we can see the optimal lineup of Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney, Chase Briscoe, Ty Gibbs, Brad Keselowski, John H. Nemechek. And all we simply have to do is go through each driver and ask, is it chalk or not? Chalk or not? Chalk or not? Chalk or no? And if there's plenty of chalk plays, obvious plays, then man versus machine, man wins. And how does man win in Fantasy NASCAR? Well, you're going to need data. So get the Fantasy NASCAR spreadsheet. Now, you can also use some help from AI. But mainly, you get the Fantasy NASCAR spreadsheet, get your basic trends, your data, your practice laps, and you make some picks. Throw in a couple. Not a lot of work, not a bunch to do, pretty fun, fairly affordable. So let's do it. Let's look. Now, again, you're probably going to hear a lot of, there's no chalk. There's no chalk in spring races. It's too volatile. Again, you're going to hear about that. And I get it. I understand that argument, and we'll explore it. Drivers make mistakes in the spring. Mechanical failures seem to be, prevalent in the beginning quarter of the season. And that's not any different from any sport or any DFS contest. Coming out of baseball. Some players, ice cold, some hot. It's not the best baseball you're going to see in April. Football, out of preseason, gosh, those teams look rough the first month of the year. And things are all over the place. So again, in NASCAR, we probably could see some of the same stuff, and it makes it hard to build lineups. Or maybe not. You just have to look. Some teams come out of the gates with speed. Some are finding it. Some are just simply failing. And, that can happen. And you could get beat down pretty bad in Q1 because you just have a hard time identifying who has speed, or you're picking drivers that just are having misfortune because it is early in the season. But you got to keep going. You got to keep gathering information. But again, that might not even be the case. There may be chalk in Q1. So let's get to it. Now, before we get to the clash, we do want to say that the schedule does also lend itself to a little bit more variance and volatility. I mean, you look at just this year, and it's pretty much like years past, we're going to start at a quarter-mile track at Bowman Gray, the Madhouse. Get your fresh fried pork rinds. Loved it. I was there 2015. Great experience. I would suggest anyone get your butt down to Winston-Salem. We're going to have 2 plate races, then a road race, then to a short track. Then we finally get an intermediate track. Oh, we got another intermediate track at Homestead, but it races completely different than the previous intermediate track of Las Vegas. Back to a short track. Then you got Darlington, which is Zone Beast. Then we go to Bristol, and which Bristol's going to show up? Do we see the fall Bristol of Kyle Larson leading nearly every one of the 500 laps, or do we see the spring Bristol with weather conditions that causes wild tire fall off and wear and tear, and you get a very unique Bristol race? What's going to happen there? And then we go back to the plate. So sure, a very strong argument for there's no chalk in the spring can be made simply based on the track variance to start the schedule. But there always seems to be enough chalk. So we got to look at the clash and see what happens. Or you can just throw your hands up and say, I'm waiting to May to play. 3 months of variance, I can't do it. Or you can do 3 months of simming. You can do that too. But anyway, let's get to it. Let's play chalk or not. Well, before we do chalk or not, let me talk about racefortheprize.com. An advertisement. Yeah, let's do an advertisement. So here it is, Fantasy NASCAR Spreadsheet, $250 for the year, usually about $30 per month. I haven't announced exactly how much it's going to be. What is the Fantasy NASCAR Spreadsheet? It's all the data that you need to have fun playing Fantasy NASCAR. It's all the data that you need to pop into the AI. And once you subscribe, you, me, and the others can jump into a lab, Zoom, whatever, and we can explore AI together. Now, is this a super special thing? No, as I've said for years, but yet people still keep subscribing. Anyone can build a spreadsheet. You can. Anyone can get this data. You know this, I know this. We've all known this for years, except for one person who somehow doesn't really get this concept and disparages me. All he does is make a spreadsheet. All he does is grab some data. You can do it yourself. Of course you can do it yourself. I've been saying it for years. I showed the guy that's attacking me how to do it for himself. Anyone can do this, but no one does. As I've said in the past, all I do here, my business model, I'm freaking McDonald's. You can cook a cheeseburger. Anyone can make a cheeseburger. But yet you still go to a store to buy a cheeseburger. Anyone can make a pizza, a frozen pizza, and yet you still pay someone to make the pizza for you because you don't want to make the pizza every night. You don't want to cook every night. You're simply just paying me to cook. That's all this is. I am not some superstar. The spreadsheet's good, but it's not a 3-star Michelin restaurant. It's not a fancy tool. The whole business model has been, always will be, and it continues to work. Even though you can make the spreadsheet, you don't want to do it. You just want to play Fantasy NASCAR. And if you just want to play Fantasy NASCAR and you want to have fun, and you don't want to go grind out spreadsheets, and you don't want to go grind out scraping websites, which I know you don't because past experience of sales has shown me, then racefortheprize.com. I get all the data for it. I'll cook your dinner. Here it is. You eat, you enjoy. That's all it is. And yet some clown thinks, I'm going to tell everybody the secret of he just makes spreadsheets and gets data that you can get for free. Yes, you can get it for free. Yes, you can. But it takes work and time and effort. You don't want to do that. Save time, have fun. That's always been racefortheprize.com. That's the business model. What a clown. Denny Hamlin, chalk or not? Yeah, chalk. Starts first. We know it's hard to pass at short tracks. We know it's hard to pass. Now, again, that's Los Angeles. Yeah, closest thing we're going to get, though. The Coliseum track is the closest thing that we are going to get to looking at Bowman Greg. You don't like it, deal with it. But either way, last year, at a track with a car, where passing's probably not going to happen, starting up front, what's the worries here, huh? Any worries? Got worries? I don't got any worries. No worries from me. So we'll file that one away as chalk. Ryan Blaney, Chase Briscoe, chalk or not? Now again, if we see a lot of chalk, that means you're not going to need really all that much to build a winning line. Just your brain and some spreadsheet power. Ryan Blaney, starting 23rd, chalk, hits. Chase Briscoe, starting 22nd, chalk, hits. Not that hard, folks. Big time place differential in a race with very few laps. Salaries are not, the salaries are pretty soft. $10,000 for Blaney, starting 23rd in a race where there's not going to be a lot of fast laps led, hog points, dominator points, whatever you want to call them, to be had. 20 place differential for Blaney, 15 for Chase Briscoe. That's chalk. You would have gone into this race building lineups. Blaney would have been popular. Briscoe would have been popular. Hamlin would have been popular, starting on the front row. So there it is. Half the lineup right there is chalk. I don't need to build 150 lineups. Again, we do need to remind ourselves, well, that's LA. Well, as far as short track racing goes, Bowman Gray's not going to race that much different in style. They're going to go out there, they're going to turn laps. It's an exhibition race. Okay, let's get to the back end of the lineup and ask some of the more hard-hitting questions. Ty Gibbs, chalk or not? Now, Gibbs will finish this race in 18th after starting 3rd, but at a $7,500 price and what he's able to do with fast laps and laps led, he ultimately slides his way in the optimal lineup, which is kind of wild, but not necessarily when we, again, look at his price and then look at this being such a short race. There's not a lot of points really in the buckets. There's just not a lot of points available to be scored in this race. And boy, does he fill up that hog bucket. Although his place differential bucket then drains. But he still gets there. Now, given the peculiar nature of his finish, you say, well, that's not chalk. Well, you got to kind of just forget about him not finishing at the end. What we need to do is go into how we would have approached the race beforehand. Now, ultimately, I would say it's not chalk, but there are a lot of reasons to say that he should have been chalk. Hindsight being 2020, Ty Gibbs was a chalky play, but most people probably were reluctant to pull the trigger when you had Denny Hamlin starting first, Joey Logano starting second, Gibbs being a rookie. There were a lot of unknowns going into the season. So all that being said, not really chalk. Hindsight being 2020, you've got a Joe Gibbs car at a short track where they were very strong early in the season, where Ty Gibbs very early in the season was running well, not chalk. But of course, going into the LA Clash, you didn't know Gibbs was going to have a hot start. We weren't sure that the new Toyota Gen 7 car was going to be that much faster than the rest of the field. It was. So ultimately, I would file this as not chalk. But again, hindsight being 2020, seems like an obvious play. It would have seemed like a really obvious play had he not got the poor finish that he got. All right, let's move to Brad Keselowski and John Hunter Nemechek. Chalk or not? These are a little trickier, or are they really? It's more of a situation of not necessarily looking at the driver in particular, but a situation of looking at DFS in particular. And especially a exhibition race like the Clash. And when we look at it from that lens, as opposed to just the simple lens of is Keselowski good or is John Hunter Nemechek good, we look at it more from a DFS angle. From the DFS angle, they're very chalky plays. And we'll start with Nemechek. We're always going to need value. We're always going to have to find a place to save. And at 6,300, starting 21st in a race where the only way to move forward is to push or bump someone, seems like a pretty obvious play. Can't lose place differential, only has to gain a couple spots to have a decent finish. Pretty chalky play. Stack in the back in these types of scenarios is always an obvious situation. Now, again, if we were simply looking at it from Nemechek or Keselowski being better than other drivers, then they wouldn't have been chalk. But you don't simply look at it from that narrow perspective. You have to factor in all the different variables, mainly being their starting position and the opportunity for them to get place differential points. And also, you weigh that against other drivers' inability to get place differential points. Where other drivers might be better plays, they might be priced too much. Where other drivers might be better drivers, they simply can't get place differential points. And they're probably not going to knock their way into the top 5. Whereas Nemechek saves you a bunch of money, starts in the back, doesn't really need to do anything. All he has to do is do nothing. Doing something can be good, doing something can be bad. And other drivers do something and do bad. And that's the story for John Hunter Nemechek. Did he get in the optimal lineup because of talent? No. I mean, unless you want to say the talent was do nothing, and that's what John Hunter Nemechek did. Basically, Nemechek's race plays out like this. He gets 3 or 4 spots through attrition, other people wrecking, other drivers doing dumb stuff. He benefits from all of those. If you pick a driver starting closer to the front, that driver doesn't necessarily benefit from wrecks or mistakes. But the guy in the very back absolutely always does. And Nemechek is in that spot. And then we get 2 cautions in the last 10 laps. He has decent restarts, grabs himself 3 or more spots, and you can see an average running position of 20th, but he finishes 13th. How? Well, give him 3 attrition spots through other drivers doing bonehead things, and then give him a couple more on the restart at the end. That's it. And that is a play or a strategy that you can implement going into the 2025 Clash of Bowman Gray. Absolutely worked at the Clash, absolutely will be the same strategy at Bowman Gray. Brad Keselowski, it's the same story. Now, was he chalk or not? I would argue it's chalk. He's starting in a sweet spot of 13th to 17th. Again, just attrition's going to get him up to maybe 10th. Hit a couple restarts at the end, and boom, Bob's your uncle, finishes 18th or 8th. And at 8,500, that works. Because A, we're not going to get the most efficient scores, point per dollar wise. B, there's not a lot of points available. Now, the only reason you would maybe argue it's not chalk is possibly because there wasn't a lot of other, well, actually, it means more chalk. I think it's pretty chalky to target those drivers in the teens. The odd situation is that there just wasn't a lot of, at his price point, drivers starting around 13th to 17th. So it means it's pretty chalky. When you had to select. So I guess I kind of jumbled that up. The argument for not chalk is the idea that, oh, we've got a driver in 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th. So we've got 5 guys to pick from. And it's really not going to matter what their talent is. Attrition-wise, if they don't wreck, they're going to move forward. If they just nail the last restart, which any driver can do, then they're going to be the play. So you got, 5 drivers possibly, or 6 starting from 13th to 17th. All can benefit from attrition. All can nail a couple restarts at the end. So anyone can come through, so there's no chalk. But the reality was that when you looked at 13 through 18 and you looked at the price point, it was much more narrow, and there was only a couple options. And Keselowski was probably the top of that list, thus chalk. So thus concludes our episode of Chalk or Not. Chocolat. Chalk or no. And ultimately, my decision's pretty chalky, which means, hey, man, I can play this fantasy NASCAR contest with my brain. I can play this fantasy NASCAR with this fantasy NASCAR spreadsheet. And if I want, I can put some stuff into AI, which has helped me do this podcast, helped me collect a lot of this data. I was exploring, dropped in all the short tracks that I thought were important, all the laps, all the race notes. and then had to analyze restarts because, as we mentioned with Keselowski and Nemechek, they nailed the restarts. Hamlin was really strong on restarts. That's where you're going to get your spots. I had the AI go through that. Maybe that's something I will explore in a future podcast. Pretty cool stuff, guys. Maybe you can join me for a Zoom and we'll talk about it. Anyway, as we close out, remember, racefortheprize.com. Again, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be the greatest fantasy NASCAR mind. I'm not going to pretend to tell you I know everything or what you need to do. I'm not going to talk at you. But this is year 13. Spreadsheet just keeps on going on. Nothing really changes. I always make it as good as I can. You know, I am just a simple spreadsheet cook, but I'm always trying to perfect the recipe. Yes, you can cook it yourself. You can cook at home. You can make your own spreadsheet. You know, I've had people over the years, I've trained people. People have come to me, hey, how do I get this data? And then I show them and talk to them like, what? No, thank you. Just here's my money. Do it for me. That's how it works. You can do it on your own. And some people have tried and they do it for a week or two. And then they're like, gosh, I just want to play fantasy sports. And if you just want to play fantasy sports, then racefortheprize.com, PayPal, Venmo, Cash App. Let me cook. You can eat. That's how this works. Have fun. I have fun helping you. I have fun seeing the pleasure on your face. I have fun making you smile like McDonald's. Nothing special. Never have been, never will be, don't care to be. But I'm happy to serve you the meal, collect a couple bucks, and support my family. We no longer do the diapers, daycare, and Mickey D's. Well, there is semi-daycare with babysitting, etc. because of scheduling. So there's still those costs. And we're out of the diapers. Now our kid wants a Nintendo Switch. You want to buy him a Nintendo Switch? Buy the Fantasy NASCAR Spreadsheet. You can't afford it, kid. It's just out of my price range. Oh, boy, we'd like to have a Switch. Yeah, man. I would like to have a lot of things, but we're poor. Probably shouldn't tell him that all the time. Yeah, we're poor. We're broke. Ain't got any money. Sorry. You know, that might have some like long-term effects like it has on me when my parents told it to me all the time. Bring on the trauma. Yeah, I probably should stop saying that. But either way, you know how I could stop saying that? You know, I could stop telling my son we're broke. You buy the Fantasy NASCAR Spreadsheet. Sounds like a plan, doesn't it? Come on, jump on in. Racefortheprize.com, PayPal, Venmo, Cash App. Let me cook for you. You can make your own coffee at home, but you still buy coffee. So, hey, here I am. Here I will be. Here I always, into the future, forever and ever. Positivity, optimism. That's what we're here for. Keep the good vibes going as always. Trip the lights, fantastic.